gentlemen, to a new episode of Africa Today, where we get you the latest news and events taking place on the African scene. And we will start off with our major top stories and reports. Cairo and the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, Badia, discussed boosting intra-regional trade between Arab and African opportunities. Both sides addressed the private sector's engagement in regional cooperation and trade exchange. More in the following report.
The Ministry of International Cooperation and the chairperson of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, Badia, held talks over the latest developments in the second Arab-Africa Trade Forum that was organized by the Badia and the Arab African Trade Bridges Program AATP. During the meeting, they discussed joint relations with Badia and its role in revitalizing intra-regional trade between the Arab countries and Africa. El-Mashat pinpointed the Badia's role in consolidating joint relations between countries and in strengthening exports to African markets through trade financing operations. She praised the bank's unremitting efforts in supporting countries' recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, as it provided about $171 million to fund 20 operations, empowering member countries to combat the pandemic's repercussions. El-Mashat affirmed the importance of enhancing the private sector's role in pushing forward intra-regional trade between Arab and African countries. This is in addition to providing further funding to Egyptian banks so as to boost the penetration of Egyptian companies and exports to the African markets. For his part, Badia, chairperson of the Board of Directors, Fahd al-Dosari, thanked Cairo for its support to the Arab-Africa Trade Forum, adding that the forum witnessed over 2 days several discussions on crucial issues where visions and points of views were exchanged in order to enhance trade exchange between Arab and African countries. Dosari further mentioned that Badia seeks to boost regional cooperation over the upcoming period through benefiting from the development boom that is mainly attributed to the private sector. He also noted that the bank is seeking to consolidate cooperation with the private sector in Egypt through its office in the country.
Welcome back, and still with our special reports. The World Bank Group's International Finance Corporation and South African technological company are in partnership to expand data center capacity and roll out fiber optic cable on the continent. More details in the following report.
The World Bank Group's International Finance Corporation, IFC, has partnered with South Africa's Liquid Intelligent Technologies to expand data center capacity and roll out fiber optic cable on the continent. In a joint statement, both sides said the link-up between the World Bank and Liquid Intelligent Technologies, formerly Liquid Telecom, aims to increase digital connectivity in Africa and to support the region's growing digital ecosystem. The investment in data centers underscores the rising demand for cloud services even in relatively undeveloped corners of the continent. U.S. tech giants are already competing with a Chinese telecom firm to set up massive data centers on the continent, as demand for cloud connectivity soars as companies save huge costs by renting storage space than building their own servers. IFC's equity and debt investments in Liquid, which to date totals approximately $250 million, will support the company to grow its hyperscale data center capacity in Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria and South Africa through its subsidiary Africa Data Centers. The investments will also support the continued rollout of Liquid's fiber broadband network, which today covers more than 100,000 kilometers of sub-Saharan Africa. According to the Broadband Commission on Sustainable Development, sub-Saharan Africa needs around $100 billion to invest to achieve affordable and high-quality broadband access by 2030. It would need at least 250,000 kilometers of new fiber lines to achieve this.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and we are glad to be joined over the phone by Dr. Ahmed El-Lisi, International Consultant for Economics. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Sir, how would you describe the importance of Arab-African trade ties for both sides?
Well, it's a huge huge opportunity, actually, for almost all the countries in the region. Unfortunately, it has not been evolving to the level that it should have been. Worth mentioning that the Arab Free Market agreement was actually signed and started before the European market. But unfortunately, it has not been put into action. And I think all or most of the countries involved in this treaty have been suffering or bad consequences, negatively speaking, of course, due to that.
Mm-hmm. Well, sir, how do you weigh the Arab-African Trade Forum as a forum for boosting trade ties between Africa and the Arab nations?
I think it's a brilliant initiative. The most important thing, and I've lived it myself during my career, the most important thing is that all participant countries should have the political will to make it happen. I mean, it is a huge initiative that's taken from Egypt, and the role that Her Excellency the Minister is playing is quite advantageous for the Egyptian economy. However, the most important and the cornerstone, the success of any such treaty is that all the participants need to put it into action. I've seen before a lot of, how would you say, shortcuts taken to avoid actually abiding by these agreements. So the execution is key.
Mm-hmm. Right, sir. How would you describe the role of Egypt historically in boosting ties between Africa and the different Arab nations?
Historically, Egypt has played a very important role, especially in the 60s and maybe the late 50s as well, in developing trade between Egypt and many African countries, as well as bilateral trading within the African continent. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, in the period as of mid-70s and the past 30 years, this role has taken a backseat and has not been as active as it should have been. That once more, there is a huge opportunity for everybody. I mean, this is about win-win, typically win-win. Everybody wins if we cooperate properly. But unfortunately, it has been, again, put in the back seat and out of focus for the last at least 30 years.
Right. Well, sir, how is the coronavirus affecting the intra-African trade in the first place and intra-regional trade with the Arab world on the larger scale?
I think the coronavirus is affecting the international trade in general, everywhere in the world. I'm not sure if there is any specificities or particular effect that the coronavirus has to do in the regional trading. I mean, you have problems in China. We all know the issues that globally in the global transportation and the failure of the supply chain across so many different continents, actually, which is causing a huge wave of inflation globally. I think coronavirus has affected the trade across the world in the same magnitude. I don't think we have anything special beyond the effect that coronavirus had on the globality of the international trade everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm. Sir, Badia aims to strengthen access to African markets through trade financing operations. Now, how would you elaborate on the mechanism of such financing operations?
In a successful trade, whether actually international or local, you need two very important axes for it to operate. The first axe is the marketing, so you have to be able to provide something that the other side wants to buy it or needs it, okay? And that's one. The second one is the finance. I mean, if you do not have the money, whether to produce or send the products you're producing to the other country, you cannot trade, okay? And likewise, from the receiving end, the receiving end or the customer in this case has to be able to and capable to pay actually in whichever format it's would be agreed between the two parties, the buyer and the seller, has to be able to buy that product. So the finance is critical. I mean, without the right financing, there is no trading. That's for sure. So I think it is a huge or a very important axe that we can build and evolve the trade based on.
Right. Well, the role of private sector in activating intra-regional trade between Arab and African countries was also discussed. Now, what role can the private sector play in this regard?
I think as economies everywhere in the region and in Egypt specifically evolve over time, we see that the private sector is playing a role almost in all sectors. I mean, the role of government is not anymore as it used to be, again, 40 or 50 years ago, that, you know, it is about producing things or to actively operate commercially in the market. The role of the government is probably to provide some products or goods or services just to balance the market factors and to make it available for the less affluent classes of the economy. So the focus now, whether internally or externally, is really on the international, on the local sector or the private sector.
Yes.
So it is crucial that the private sector plays an active role in that. The private sector has a lot of flexibility, has a much quicker, and that's not in Egypt only, that's everywhere. Okay, private sector, the decision taking or making process is so much faster than the governmental decision making. So the interest and the capability of research, the capability of adapting to the receiving customer or to the receiving side of the transaction is so much higher within the private sector. So I think the private sector or the focus on the private sector will allow us to succeed in a much, much faster pace rather than, you know, to be stuck with the governmental sector, which risks the routine and red tape.
Right. I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed El-Lithi. Many thanks for your insight. And dear viewers, now we go back to our special reports. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Africa has exceeded 8,527,000, according to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Africa CDC, the specialized healthcare agency for the African Union, said South Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, and Ethiopia are among the countries with the most cases in the continent. More details on this report.
Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, said the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Africa has exceeded 8,527,350. The Africa CDC, the specialized healthcare agency of the African Union, said the death toll from the pandemic across the continent crossed 219,120. Over 7,925,000 patients across the continent have recovered from the disease so far. South Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, and Ethiopia are among the countries with the most cases in the continent. South Africa has recorded the most COVID-19 cases in Africa, followed by Morocco in northern Africa. In terms of the caseload, Southern Africa is the most affected region, followed by the northern and eastern parts of the continent, while Central Africa is the least affected region in the continent.
Well, dear viewers, that brings us to the end of this edition of Africa Today. Many thanks for watching and stay tuned for more coming up here on Nile TV International.